Hi everybody, Dave Thomas here again, and this time I am building the Estes Showstopper. This is a relatively large rocket, but it goes together fairly quickly, and it's part of Estes E2X series. So this is a great beginner rocket if you want to start with something big and showy. So let's go ahead and open this up. Alright, so the first thing to do is check the instruction sheet here and make sure we have all the parts. Okay, so the decal sheet was in with the instructions, and then we have a nose cone pre-finished, also a pre-finished body tube. So one of the nice things about this particular kit is that you don't have to paint it. Alright, we've got a small parts bag here, and it has the fins and the shock cord and the parachute, a reinforcement sticker type thing there. And then in the other small parts package we have the launch lugs, the base of the nose cone, the fin can, and the motor retainer. So it looks like everything is here, and I'm going to clear this away and we'll get started. These are the pieces that were in the fin can package, and this is the fin can itself, which is our first thing on the instructions. I am actually going to skip ahead for just a moment. Okay, and I'm going to put the nose cone together so that it has time to dry while we're doing the rest of the rocket. Alright, so go ahead and open up the nose cone package. Okay, now for this we're going to want some tube type plastic cement like this. You can use brush on cement, but it tends to be really thin and it may not get a good bond. A good alternative to this would be gel type super glue. Okay, so whichever one you end up using, we're just going to put a bead of glue on here of moderate thickness. Okay, so you want to make sure you have enough that it binds all the way around, but if you get too much on there, you have the potential of melting the nose cone. Okay, actually this looks like a pretty sturdy nose cone. So, and then just take this base piece, insert that, and mine's really stiff, so I'm just going to leave it alone. If you do have more movement in there, go ahead and turn this back and forth a little bit, and that just helps distribute the glue. And at this point, I'm going to let that set aside, and the glue can be drying while we're doing the rest of it. Alright, so for the fin can, here you can use the same glue, or if you want a little bit more control, you can use a brush-on type cement like this. And lots of different hobby brands have this, and it's just a matter of what's available to you or what your personal preference is. But what we're going to do here is run glue along all of the edges here, but without getting it here. Alright, so if you look at this from the side, we don't want glue on these indentations here because that's where the fins are going to go. But we do want glue on the other edges. So basically anything sticking up. Alright, and they don't show putting glue on the motor mount here, the actual retainer threads. And if you're using a tube type cement, I wouldn't do this because you don't have the control. But with a brush on cement, this doesn't get really thick, so you don't have to worry about clogging the threads or getting glue down inside where the motor has to go. Now the only drawback to this tube or the brush on cement here is that it does dry very quickly, and so you have to go through and make all of your application here as quickly as you can, and you might even need to renew it. So if it's looking like it's all evaporated off there, go ahead and redo it. add a little bit more to it. Okay, and then these two pieces simply click together. Once you have them properly aligned. Okay, there's a hole. And a hole. There we go. Okay, and just hold that for 30 to 60 seconds to let the glue form a good bond. Now our next step will be to put the fins on. Alright, but you want to make sure that this is dry completely before doing that, because the fins are going to put some force on these slots here, and where the seams are, that's going to be a weak spot, and so if you try and put the fins on before this is completely dry, you may force the fin can open. So we're going to skip this step for just a little bit here, and then come down and start preparing the body tube. Alright, so they have us drawing a line down on the tube before we measure it for the launch lug there. I don't want to do that. It's really hard to erase lines once you've got them on this, and so I would prefer to have a good idea of where this is going to go first. Alright, so I'm going to take my ruler. The launch lug here is about 7 centimeters long, and we want 8.3 centimeters from the aft end of the tube. Alright, so here I'm just going to measure this. So 8.3 is going to be right about there. Okay, and then I'm going to add 7 to that. So it's going to be 15.3 right there. Okay, now you may not be able to see that in the video. I may try to make these as light as possible. Now here I've switched over to a fine point marker, just because it's going to be easier to see on the reflective surface here. And I'm just going to draw a line between my 2 points there. If you don't have a straight edge like that one, you can also use a door frame. Alright, so now I'm going to place this over my line. Okay, and what we want is just be able to see just a little bit of the line on either side there, either end. And now I'm going to push that down so that we get these little indentations from the nubs on here. So just push it down enough so that you can see it, and then take your hobby knife here and cut an X in it. Not very large. Alright, and now you can come back and push those nubs into the X's that you just made there. Okay, so that, put a little pressure on that to squeeze it down. Okay, and if you need to, you can enlarge these. I'm going to use the front of my pencil here just to round them up a little bit. Ideally, you want this to be completely flush when it's mounted. This has got a little bit of a bow to it, so I'm trying to eliminate that. Okay, so that's the way it's going to go. Now, according to the instructions, they're using the tube type plastic cement on this. But because I am gluing two dissimilar surfaces here, I'm going to use some gel type super glue. If all you have is the plastic cement, then go ahead and use that. Alright, but I'm going to start off by just putting a little bit in each hole here. And then I'm going to run it on the interior of the launch lug. The main thing here is don't get glue up into the launch lugs themselves. I'll put a bead along here. And don't use too much, because if this squirts out, it's kind of hard to remove without making a noticeable mar to it. Alright, and I'm going to go and put that back on. Okay, once more finding my indentations. And I'm just going to hold this here for another 30 to 60 seconds while that glue sets. My glue has set, and now I'm going to add this reinforcement sticker to it, and this was in the same parts bag that has the parachute. So I'm just going to peel this off, and this is going to go right in the middle of our body, or of our launch lug here. And I'm going to put this little stand on to keep it from rolling around. Alright, so I'm going to place this gently at first. Okay, just to make sure I've got it reasonably straight. Now, don't just press down on the ends of this. We want this to conform to the edge. So I'm going to press this down and then use my fingernail here to get it down along that corner edge, and then smooth it out. And then do the same thing on the other side. So we're going to drop that down into that corner edge and then smooth it out. And this is just going to give us some additional reinforcement to the launch lug, so that if you catch some wind on the launch pad or something like that, it doesn't just tear it out. Now that the glue is dry on my fin can, we're going to go ahead and attach the fins. And the first thing I want to do is just dry fit them. So they pop into the slots and then push forward. Okay, and they should be fairly tight. And as we go around here, check each one. Alright, that one's going to be very tight. Okay, and the main reason I'm doing this is to determine how I want to glue them. Alright, so all of these are pretty tight going in. So the way they show it here is to apply some plastic cement to this area of the fin can and then slide that in. A problem I've seen in doing this is that sometimes you get the glue on there and you go to put your fin in and it locks before you get it all the way up, and you end up with these weird canted fins, or one fin sticking out longer than the other. And so you can do a couple of things here. One is I recommend go ahead and using the brush on cement rather than the tube type. And you can use this in one of two ways. I'm going to show you both here. So one is to just treat it like we have here. So we're going to put some glue where the fins aren't yet. Alright, we don't need it down in the holes, but do it along the edges here. Alright, and then moving quickly, go ahead and put your fin in and push that all the way up. Alright, that one was fortunately a looser one. The alternative way to do this is that you put the fin in, go ahead and shove it all the way up, and then add the brush on type cement afterward. And just let it get down into that seam by capillary action. Okay, and I suggest doing this if your fins are really tight. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and check this one again. I think that's loose enough I can use this method. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and put the retainer cap on just momentarily here. Make sure that nothing's blocking it. Alright, so if you end up with a fin that didn't go all the way up or something like that, this will probably still mount under it. If it doesn't, just take a little sandpaper and sand off a little bit of that fin base until it does. But if you got everything to fit right, it should go on without any problems. Alright, now be really careful here. If you think you slopped any glue down on here, make sure you let that dry before you put this on. Otherwise you'll glue this in place and then you have a display model. Alright, next we're going to add the fin can and connect that to our body tube here. And really the only thing I want you to be aware of here is the launch lug itself. So I'm dry fitting this, there's no glue on it yet. Alright, so that should just go right in here. But when you're done, you're going to want to have your launch lug aligned in between two of the fins. Okay, for this part, again, you can either use gel type super glue or you can use the tube type plastic cement. The brush on cement will not work well here because what happens is it just soaks into the cardboard and doesn't make a good bond. The same is true of the thinner super glues. They'll do the same thing. They'll run into the cardboard and then won't give a good bond to the plastic. Alright, I'm going to use the gel super glue on mine. Alright, so we're going to run a bead of this right inside. Okay, yep, got it all the way around there. Okay, and then we're going to take our fin can, insert that, move it back and forth a couple of times to get good even distribution of the glue, and then sight down to center the launch lug between two of the fins. Okay, and then once again I'm going to hold this for about 30 to 60 seconds, and then I'm going to set it aside to let it dry completely. While I'm waiting for the fins to dry, I'm going to prepare the parachute here. And the shroud lines are already attached on this. So just open it up here and then find the loops. Okay, so the shroud lines are in 3 loops. You just want to untangle these and then put them all onto a finger. Alright, so I'm just going to grab those like that. And then in your other hand, grab the center of the parachute sheet itself. Okay, and then we're going to pull it all taut here and adjust the sides of the parachute shrouds until all those corners are at approximately the same spot. Alright, now without letting go, take the loops down here in your other hand. And there are 2 ways to do this. So the way the instructions show, you tie this directly to the nose cone. So put your loops through. And notice I'm always keeping at least 2 fingers on the shroud lines so they don't change their length relative to each other. Alright, and then they show the passing the parachute through this big loop here. And this is part of the reason I don't like doing this is we have to let go of the shroud lines to do that. You can also pass the entire nose cone through. So if you look at that again here, alright, I've got the big loops through. I'm going to pass the entire nose cone through that, still not letting go down here, alright, and then pulling that until it's taut. Now I'm not going to do it all the way because I'm going to do a different means of doing this. And I don't want to have to try and untie it, so I'm going to undo that whole thing once more. Okay, the alternative is to use a snap swivel like this one to attach the parachute to the nose cone. And this gives us two advantages. One is that it's interchangeable now. So this is an 18-inch parachute, but maybe you've got a really windy day and you want to swap it out for a 12-inch parachute or a 15-inch parachute. Okay, and that can be done very easily if you've got a snap swivel. So once again here, I'm going to get my loops. Alright, and now I'm going to make those really small here. Okay, and then I'm put it on the swivel side. So we want the snap side away from it. The swivel side, we're going to put our shroud line loops through the loop on the swivel. Okay, and then I'm going to open up those loops a little bit. And now I'm going to put the entire swivel through the loops and pull them downward. Okay, so now I've got it like that, and now I'm just going to tighten that, and that's going to make a nice little knot right there on the end. And the other advantage of having this, you can probably feel while you're doing this, is that it allows the parachute to turn somewhat against the rocket. And this is important if you got this a little bit canted or not quite the same length, the parachute's going to tend to spin. And what that'll do is it winds up the shroud lines, and so as that continues you get less and less inflation of the parachute. By having the snap swivel on there, if there's any turning, that releases it. Okay, so that it just turns on the swivel rather than winding up the shroud lines. All right, so once you've got that knot where you want it, then go ahead and just put a little dab of either wood glue or white glue on it. Okay, and by little I mean just barely there, and then just work that into the knot, and that will keep that from coming loose. Then when you're ready to attach it to the nose cone, you simply open up the clip part, the snap part, put that over and snap it into place. Okay, now the size of the snap swivel doesn't make a whole lot of difference in terms of the rocket weight. So any snap swivel you can buy at a fishing store, sporting goods store, hardware store, wherever you get your snap swivels. The rocket is not going to be the deciding factor in terms of its weight. Any of them will hold that. What you do need is a snap part that will go onto the eyelet of the nose cone and still move freely there. Okay, you don't want it to get locked in one position because it's so narrow that it clings to that eyelet there. Okay, I'm going to let my glue on the knot dry, and then we're going to come back to the body tube and do the shock cord. Now to attach the shock cord we need to cut out this mount, and if you don't want to destroy your instructions you can make a photocopy of that and cut it. Alright, and then get the shock cord out of the small parts bag here. And for this you're going to need some wood glue or white glue, either one works. And so I'm going to start by putting a fairly heavy bead of glue down the middle of the 2 and the 3, leaving the 1 blank. And I'm going to take one end of my shock cord and I'm going to put it on here at an angle. Okay, the instructions show just doing this straight down. The reason I do it at an angle though is so that when we fold this up in a moment, there's less thickness due to the shock cord actually being stacked on itself. All right, so once you've got your glue spread out on there, go ahead and take the one section and you're going to fold that up against the two. Okay, and you want to get nice even amounts of glue underneath that. And then we're going to take the 2 and fold it up against the 3. Alright, and here's what I was talking about. So now the folded part of the shock cord is laying next to where the shock cord exits instead of directly on top of it, which would make it thicker. Now I'm going to induce a curvature here, like that, and then put more glue out here on this surface. Looks like I need a little more glue. But in the end, what we want here are even layers of glue between the folds of the paper, and also an even layer of glue here, because this is where we're going to mount the shock cord to the rocket. So I'm going to put my bend back in it there. Alright, now take the rocket and we're going to slide this inside, not yet touching the glue to the inside. This needs to go down at least 1.5 inches so that it clears the nose cone. And if you can get it further down, if you got long skinny fingers, that's even better. Alright, now I'm going to turn the whole thing over so that now it rests against the inside. I'm going to take my fingers here and press it against the wall of the body tube while I'm holding it. So I'm pressing against my hand here. And just work out all the bubbles and get it as flat as you possibly can. And I don't think I can get you a good view of this. There you can just see it. Alright. Go ahead and look down. See if there's anything else that needs done. I've got a little blob of glue in there and I can't quite reach it. I'm just going to smooth that out with an applicator. Now we want to let that dry for a good 20 to 30 minutes to make sure that the glue does not come undone, or that we don't glue a piece of the shock cord to the inside. But while that is drying, you can go ahead and attach the nose cone. So just set the other end of the shock cord through the eyelet and tie a double knot or 2 half hitches into the shock cord, and then pull on this from all directions. So pull the long end, pull the free end, and then pull both of them. We want to get all the slack out of that knot. Okay, and then we want to cut this back so that it can't get up between the shoulder of the nose cone and the body tube, but we don't want it right up against the knot either. So I recommend having about 1/4 inch or about 6 millimeters there. Okay, cut just a little bit more of that off. Okay, so something like that, so that the free end can't get caught against the body tube. And then just like we did with the shroud lines, I'm going to put just a little dab of glue on that knot and work it in. And that's just going to help lock the knot into place. So now I'm going to let this completely dry, and when we come back, we'll attach the parachute and put the whole rocket together. I've let the glue on the shock cord mount dry for about an hour, and so now we can go ahead and put everything together. So I will attach my parachute here with my snap swivel. Okay, now I'm not going to launch this right away, but folding the parachute goes about the same way. So just fold it into a triangle here of about that size. Take the shroud lines about halfway down them and just loop those up into the parachute, and then fold the edges of the triangle over the shroud lines. And then I like to fold that over maybe one more time there. And then you can stick the shock cord down inside. And then put the parachute in on top. Okay, and then just carefully put the rest in, making sure that nothing gets caught between the shoulder of the nose cone and the body tube there. Okay, and if you can give this a shake like that, so if that came out like mine just did, you can increase the friction there by simply adding a little bit of masking tape. And so I'm just going to do like half a circumference here. Alright, and try that again. Here we go. And now if we give it a little bit of a shake, it does not come loose, but it still comes loose with an easy pull. Okay, and that's the way we want it. Alright, our last task then is to add the decals. I recommend washing your hands thoroughly before you do this step so it minimizes the transfer of fingerprint residue onto your rocket. Okay, so here we've got one large decal that takes up this whole space, and then some smaller ones. And you can do it the way the packaging shows here if you like, or you can just use whatever pattern you like. You can omit the decals altogether. You could put your own decals on. They don't affect the flight of the rocket, so however you want to decorate your particular rocket, that's fine. What I'm going to do is, first of all, take my launch lug side and put that down, because this way the decals will be most visible when it's on the launch pad. I'm going to take this big one off. Okay, trying to handle it by its edges. Now the tricky thing with these is you've pretty much got to hit it where you want it the first time. Okay, so I'm going to put mine right about here. Okay, you can just kind of gently lay that down. And then if you need to move it, sometimes you can. What I found on a lot of these pre-finished body tubes is if you try and lift the decal back up, it tends to peel the finish off. So if you do need, you can kind of bring this back up. If you need to reposition it, just be careful if it starts peeling the color off. You're pretty much stuck with it right there. Alright, now I'm just going to move from the center outward and let that stick down with a minimal amount of bubbles on it. And then once you've got it down, you can go through and really smoosh down on it. Don't collapse the body tube, but just move toward the edges, and this will help force air bubbles out. Okay, I'm going to do the rest of them later on, if at all. I may just go with what I've got here. And with that, this model is ready to fly. And as I said, this was a fairly easy kit to put together. Even with all the glue drying time and everything, this took me an hour and a half total. So you can build this in the early afternoon, launch it in the evening, and good to go. So, have a great launch and a safe recovery, and please stay tuned for more of my videos.